to have sex, it's like, regardless of whether or not you logically made the decision to have sex, your body did not consent. And
Mm-hmm.
so there may be some revolting of
Yeah.
like, nope, I don't want to do this. I'm shutting down. I don't like it. I'm gonna cause you pain because you're making me do something I don't want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's listening to that and listening to all of the parts of yourself that are trying to speak to you.
That's a really, really good point. And that's applicable to, I think, so many eras is that like listen to your body, like and listen to it like at all points in time that it is communicating to you. Um, and so everybody, y'all know there's a book called Body Keeps the Score. And so sometimes we can know something in our body before we'll know it consciously. And I'll tell you specifically, when I'm stressed, my shoulders start hurting. But I may
Mhm.
not realize that I'm operating at a higher stress level because you're kind of doing and getting things done and everything. But when my shoulder starts hurting, I can say, oh, okay, I'm more stressed than I realized. Okay. What was the straw that broke the camel's back? So that was a really, really good point. All right. Taj, for you, what would you say?
I would talk to my client about, well, one, I want to echo what the
Mhm.
two ladies before me said, and I would talk to them about how they're perceiving their sexuality at present. Because after a trauma, it can manifest itself in like different ways. Like I've seen people who, after a sexual trauma, they don't want to be touched. They don't want to be
Mhm.
looked at anyone,
Mhm.
want to be isolated. And I've seen clients who, after a sexual trauma, they want to be as liberated and explorative and
Yeah.
thing under the sun. And so normalizing that both answers, not really answers, but both ways of processing that trauma are
Mhm.
as long
Mhm.
as listening to your body, you're honoring your body. But I think that part, the listening and honoring your body, would come through therapy.
Mhm.
Because when you're just, in the throes of dealing with the PTSD of the trauma, you're just kind of reacting.
Yeah.
And your reaction may be to go hide in the closet. Your reaction may be to go out
Yeah.
into the street, and so I would just, with my client, I would tell them that both is okay, but
Mhm.
let's work to get you back to a place where your mind and your body are in alignment. You're not just
Mhm.
from what's going on, you're actually present. So that's where I would start.
All right, thank you. All right, Mariana, you have a person who's sitting in front of you that has had some type of trauma and it's affecting them sexually. What do you say?
Mhm.
How do you help them?
My initial response would be to like really sit with them in that moment to
Hmm.
validate their feelings, to let them know I believe them.
Yeah.
Um, and and I think that's like a really important first step. And then also I would psychoeducate.
Ooh,
It's
yeah.
really important to, I think so many people have the experience of being like, why am I not over this? Why is this happening? What's
Mm-hmm.
going on? And it can be really difficult for people to connect all of these dots together.
Mm-hmm.
And just taking the time to say, it is okay that your body is still reacting this way. In fact, it makes complete and total sense. And it's something that we're going to work through and we're going to be able to process together. So I feel like that psychoeducation element is really important just to get people to accept where they are right now because it makes total sense. It is
Yeah.
only the natural outcome after
Mm-hmm.
what has happened.
Definitely so. What's coming to mind for me is people who have the a reaction to a trauma years later.
Mm.
And so, for one example, there's a story in my head, and I don't know if I got it off of TV or from a training or from one of my own clients. I have no idea. Well, I don't think it was one of my own clients, but the lady had experienced some childhood molestation, kind of grew up, moved on, went to college, got married, had no problem, had a baby, didn't have any problems until her baby daughter turned 6, which is the same age her molestation started. And then it all came back and she freaked out. Because now, how do I protect my child when I wasn't protected? And this just all came flooding back in on her. And oftentimes, I worked 2 years with military veterans. And a lot of those guys just kind of keep it moving, keep it moving, keep it moving until they retire or until they have to sit quiet and get still. And then it all comes flooding back. And they're just like, why is my face leaking? I don't understand. Like, what's going on? And so, it's so funny because they're like, like this is something that happened, like our Vietnam veterans, like this is something that happened 40 years ago. This is something that I've lived my whole life and I've raised my children. I've worked 8 jobs and I shouldn't be dealing with this. And yeah, it will come back one day. Like it's going to come back one day somehow, some way. Yes, Taj.
I just had a question that popped into my mind. Would you all, as fellow clinicians, ever recommend to your clients that they disclose their trauma to their loved ones? Or how would you handle a client that maybe has kept this from their loved ones? Would you encourage that they disclose it or keep it? How would you handle that?
I'll jump in first. I'm going to handle it on a case-by-case basis. Okay. Sometimes revealing something like that can be helpful and beneficial to the whole family. Sometimes it can rip families apart. Either way, I really want to talk to my client about before they disclose anything. I want to make sure they're completely comfortable with their story, that they've healed completely. Also, if they're going to disclose anything to anybody else, I want them to be in a place where no matter what how that person reacts, they're still okay. And so let's say I've known people who've disclosed things to their parents and their parents like, you're lying. Why would you say that? Because that parent can't handle it. So I need my client to be in a place where they can be like, okay, that's your reaction. Thank you. I'm going back to therapy now. Like I really need my client to be able to handle that well, and kind of keep it moving and then figure out kind of what the purpose is. Of
I
that.
would
And
say, oh, go ahead.
no, finish. You can go, Jessica.
Well, so I guess being in a place where I'm healed and I'm okay, like that may not happen without talking about it with your loved ones. And so figuring out what are you okay with, what is tolerable, what is intolerable. And are like, let's run through scenarios. Okay, what if they act like this? What if they act like this? And what if, like how are you going to respond to this? And knowing that if we're talking about this, like I'm here and it may be like I'm giving you access to text me after hours or be there as extra support during this because you need that extra support right then, depending on what that looks like. Because it is a big step. And ultimately, I think it's important to be transparent because I think it informs so much of, oh, this is why you won't do this, or this is why you have this reaction, which humans are flawed. We end up making up stories in our own heads. And if the story is, you think I'm disgusting versus, no, you had this horrible experience happen, I'm immediately like, okay, throw all of my stuff out the window.
Right.
Let's take care of you. And I think that that's really important to remember because a story is happening either way.
Yes. Oh, that's really good. All right. Anybody else wants to jump in?
Yeah, no, I echo of like it's so much on a case by case basis, and I try to process with the client what they need. Like I've been with a client before where like their partner didn't know, and as we processed more and more, it became evident to the client that like, okay, they need to let their partner know, because they're kind
Mm-hmm.
of like stuck with them in their relationship right now, and it's
Mm-hmm.
hindering their relationship actively.
Mm-hmm.
And also I've been with the client too, of like, who had trauma with penetration, who was going to see like a pelvic floor therapist. And so it's like, even though it's like in a slightly different situation, it's still this moment of having to tell your story to someone.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like kind of like what Jessica was saying, of like, even though this client isn't fully healed, it's something that we were able to go through together and like work on their story, get down like, what do we do if this happens, if this happens, if this happens,
Mm-hmm.
and that was really beneficial for the client, and like the client was able to take that risk, and in this circumstance, it
Mm-hmm.
really paid off for them.
Yay. Oh, that's really, really good. Okay, what's coming up for anybody else?
I would say it's echo the case by case basis. I would only say it to people if you feel like it's the root to why certain behaviors are happening.
Mm-hmm.
I can say from a person who has been sexually assaulted, when I have disclosed it, sometimes I had people kind of handicapping me, if that's a word, of like certain things. They'll be so
Mm-hmm.
sensitive because of that. And I'm like, you don't have to handle me like that. Like, I'm okay. But they were overly sensitive and
Mm-hmm.
trying to make me feel better. And that can make somebody feel like, okay, I should have kept it to myself.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very good to be transparent with people. But if you don't feel like it's affecting you in some areas of your life, just talk to your therapist, talk to anybody who you feel like
Mm-hmm.
has felt the wrath of some deep-rooted things that you are now discovering about yourself, and now deconstructing why those behaviors are happening based on that trauma.
Yeah, that's really good. That really makes me think of privacy versus secrecy.
Mhm.
And and this is to me a concept to talk about globally, no matter what the disclosure is that our client is sitting in front of us and they're thinking about disclosing. Okay, let's talk about privacy versus secrecy. What are some things that you'd like to keep private, and what's the benefit and your rights to keep things private versus something that you're holding in secret?
Mhm.
And so I think, and that the line is going to be different for each person on where that is, but that is something that I like to talk to people about after or before any type of disclosure on any level for any reason. Okay, what are we doing this for? Is this something that we need to get private, or was this a secret and it didn't feel good and it needs to be let out? Um, I think secrecy can definitely be damaging to relationships. And so I don't want people feeling like they have to keep secrets or anything like that. But you have a right to privacy. And so balancing that out even after a traumatic event. So yeah. Okay, Tosh, that was a great question. You got any more in your hand?
No, not right.
All right. I want to talk about length of treatment. What have you guys noticed when you're helping somebody overcome a trauma to get to like a fully wonderful functioning sexual life? How long do y'all think it usually takes? You're muted, Jessica.
I think it just wildly varies. And I think it's one of those
Mhm.
things that, um, while I hate to say it, I've also experienced some sexual abuse, and so it's one of those things that like you think it's fine, and then something else happens, and then you've got to process it through a new lens because
Mhm.
you either learn
Mhm.
something about yourself or something happens with a partner, and you're like, whoa, okay, I thought I was okay with this. Now I've got to
Mhm.
go through it again, which can feel
Mhm.
very defeating and very frustrating and very angering. Like, are you
Mhm.
freaking kidding me? I've got to do this again.
Mhm.
And so it's just being aware that it's going to take time to give yourself patience,
Yeah.
space, grace, and
Mhm.
that things might trigger it down the road. And as much as
Yeah.
you feel like you've dealt with it, it may come back. And
Yeah.
um because things, like you talked about with the kid becoming 6, of like, I thought this was fine, and now I have
Right.
a 6-year-old, and oh my god, I'm petrified and
Yes.
can't leave the house.
Yep.
And it's one of those things that, like, that's okay. We're constantly changing, we're constantly growing, and yeah, it takes time.
It so takes time. Okay, anybody else?
I think also when you first talk about it versus when you're in the road to recovery, you talk about it, like Jessica said, as a new lens of how dominant is it now in my current story. And I feel like once you keep talking about it, maybe it used to be big and now it's something that you look at and you learn from it or you help other people grow from it. So it all depends. It's still going to be a part of your story, but how dominant is it?
Yeah, definitely. And I'll say I always want my clients to move from victim to survivor. And what does that mean now that I've survived this? And what strength can I draw from this? And what life lessons have I learned about the world, about myself, about people? And really being able to see it as there's this term one of my coaches used to use, a gift in dirty wrapping paper. And so, and I usually use that kind of as a sign that my client has healed when they're just like, yeah, not happy about that. Hate that that happened. Would never want that to happen to anybody else. But I've learned this, I've learned this, I've learned this, I've learned this, I've learned this about myself, that I can be incredibly strong and resilient. Yes, Taj.
Well, did anybody else want to chime in on that question? Because another question popped into my head.
All right,
Yeah, I was
go
just
ahead.
gonna even say really quick that I also echo that it just varies like
Mhm.
huge spectrum, and that's totally okay wherever you fall on the spectrum. And my thought was like going to kind of like coping mechanisms, and it's like what were the
Mhm.
coping mechanisms that you went to at the time, and what is it going to be like to like put those aside and search for new ones, because I think that also is a part of
Mm,
like how long treatment time will be.
yeah.
um I think a lot of people tend to like beat themselves up and have a lot of shame over how they like responded to a situation in the past.
Mhm.
And I always like to say like it is, you develop that coping mechanism for a reason. You know,
Yeah.
like it worked for you for a time and now you've outgrown it and you need
Mhm.
something else, and it's
Mhm.
okay to recognize that
Yeah.
and like begin to say, okay, yeah, that worked and now I want to do something else that works better.
Yeah. Definitely. Definitely okay to say that. Okay. All right, Taj, next question for us. Thank you.
So as I'm listening, again, something that came to me is that just understanding that as a woman, we more than likely are going to know someone else who has been sexually assaulted. I mean, just our conversation,
Yeah.
out of the five of us, we know for sure. I'm saying myself is included in this group. We know for sure it has happened to. And that ratio is already crazy. But then if you talk to men and if you
Mhm.
ask know anybody who has been the perpetrator in this
Mhm.
scenario, they look around like, I don't know anybody. And so that just got me thinking, like, how would we have this conversation with someone who is the perpetrator of sexual assault, but maybe doesn't realize it, didn't understand that that's what they were doing.
Mhm.
But in addition, we're hearing the story and we're just like, you were actually the one who inflicted this trauma on someone else.
Yeah.
So how do you address that?
Carefully. And so realizing, and what I like to do, and when I can't do it, I go to supervision until I can, is to see all of my clients through a lens of compassion. What was going on with you? What were you experiencing? What need were you trying to get met? What was happening for you in that space and in that time? And where are you now? And so working with that client is a lot of times it's helping them figure out themselves what was going on. I've only had that client one or two times, and when I've had that client, three, um, it all of these clients, four, I'm sorry, my mind like keeps thinking, have when they sit with me, they've just been mortified at their behavior. Like, man, like I can't, believe that I was that person. And so, which actually is a really good thing. So most of us should be kind of learning and growing and looking back on our old selves like, I can't believe I did that. I can't believe I said that. I'm so much more mature now. And so helping them have compassion for themselves, helping them be able to take ownership of their actions and apologize if needed, verbalize some things if needed, because that has been very healing for a lot of people, just to say, I was wrong, and for them to be able to sit in that without beating themselves up. Because I think if they start beating themselves up and getting in this shame spiral, my fear is they put themselves in such a unhealthy state that they could hurt other people in other ways, or in the same way. So I really want them to be able to just kind of look at themselves with compassion, figure out what happened then, figure out what they need to do for it not to happen again, and move forward and move forward. And I usually sit with them just in the space of, most of us in this world have done something that we're horrified for. Like, I just can't believe I did that, And I usually disclose mine. Mine was when I was in college, I raced up 75, like raced at like 100 miles per hour. Yes. I am horrified that I did that. Like, I could have killed myself. I could have killed the people on the interstate. I could have killed the people I was racing with. Like, I just can't believe that I did that, that I was so, like, careless, that I was so unthoughtful about the other people on the road. Like, but I was I was 19. Like, I was I was 19. And so I want people to be able to sit with that. Like, yeah, I just messed up. Like, that was just terrible. I should have never done that. And then apologize and then just try to live better. Yeah. All right. Does anybody else want to add anything in the last 4 minutes to that?
I think just kind of talking to Tasha's of like, oh, I don't know anybody.
Right.
It's like intention versus impact, and I know we've talked
Mhm.
about this as well with like
Yes.
appointments and arrangements. Is that may not have been your intention, but what
Mhm.
that was the impact that you had,
Yeah.
and realizing, that how comfortable are you taking accountability for your actions, even if that wasn't your intention?
Mhm.
Like, can you accept the impact that your actions had?
Mhm. Yeah. And sit with it and be okay without extreme measures. Either way. Yeah. All right. Good question, Tosh. Thank you so much. So, I do want to say that I think usually when we think about trauma and sexual trauma, we think about women who've been like assaulted or flat out raped or things like that. But there are some men who've experienced traumas as well. And so, men, I want you to know that we're here to listen to you, that there is no judgment. And I think a lot of men feel kind of like a double layer of judgment. Like, how did I let this happen to me? And like, what are people gonna think if this happened to me? And I can never tell anybody. And so I just want you guys to know, if you're in the sound of my voice, that there's a safe space for you here to figure it out, because it's coming out in your life some type of way. Like, I promise you it is. And so let's figure that out so that you can have your absolute best life. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, ladies. Thank you so much. Anybody got a last thing before I let y'all go? All right. Well, then that's it. Y'all have a great and wonderful day, and I'll see y'all next Friday. All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.